Book 2, Chapter 11 of the Lancashire Witches. This recording is in the public domain. Reading by Andy Minter. The Lancashire Witches, a Romance of Pendle Forest, by William Harrison Ainsworth. Book 2, Pendle Forest. Chapter 11. Mother Demdike. The heavy rain which began to fall as Roger Nowell entered Rough Lee had now ceased, and the sun shone forth again brilliantly, making the garden look so fresh and beautiful that Richard proposed a stroll within it to Alizon. The young girl seemed doubtful at first whether to comply with the invitation, but she finally assented, and they went forth together alone, for Nicholas, fancying they could dispense with his company, only attended them as far as the door, where he remained looking after them, laughing to himself, and wondering how matters would end. "No good will come of it, I fear," mused the worthy squire, shaking his head, "and I am scarcely doing right in allowing Dick to entangle himself in this fashion. But where's the use of giving advice to a young man who is over head and ears in love? He'll never listen to it, and will only resent interference. Dick must take his chance. I have already pointed out the danger to him, and if he chooses to run headlong into the pit, why, I cannot hinder him. After all, I am not much surprised. Alizon's beauty is quite irresistible, and were all smooth and straightforward in her history, there could be no reason why. I am as foolish as the lad himself. Sir Ralph Assheton, the proudest man in the shire, would disown his son if he married against his inclinations. No, my pretty youthful fair, since nothing but misery awaits you, I advise you to make the most of your brief season of happiness. I should certainly do so were the case my own." Meanwhile, the objects of these ruminations had reached the terrace overlooking Pendle Water, and were pacing slowly backwards and forwards along it. "One might be very happy in this sequestered spot, Alizon," observed Richard. "To some persons it might appear dull, but to me, if blessed with you, it would be little short of paradise." "Alas, Richard," she replied, forcing a smile, "why conjure up visions of happiness which can never be realised? But even with you I do not think I could be happy here. There is something about the house which, when I first beheld it, filled me with unaccountable terror. Never since I was a mere infant have I been within it till to day, and yet it was quite familiar to me, horribly familiar. I knew the hall in which we stood, together with its huge arched fireplace and the armorial bearings upon it, and could point out the stone on which were carved my father's initials, R.N., with the date 1572. I knew the tapestry on the walls, and the painted glass in the long range of windows. I knew the old oak staircase, and the gallery beyond it, and the room to which my mother led me. I knew the portraits painted on the panels, and at once recognised my father. I knew the great carved oak bedstead in this room, and the high chimney piece, and the raised hearthstone, and shuddered as I gazed at it. You will ask me how these things could be familiar to me. I will tell you. I had seen them repeatedly in my dreams. They have haunted me for years. But I only to day knew they had an actual existence, or were in any way connected with my own history. The sight of that house inspired me with a horror I have not been able to overcome, and I have a presentiment that some ill will befall me within it. I would never willingly dwell there." "The warning voice within you, which should never be despised, prompts you to quit it," cried Richard, "and I also urge you in like manner." "In vain," sighed Alizon. "This terrace is beautiful," she added, as they resumed their walk, "and I shall often come hither if I am permitted. At sunset, this river and the woody heights above it must be enchanting, and I do not dislike the savage character of the surrounding scenery. It enhances, by contrast, the beauty of the solitude. I only wish the spot commanded a view of Pendle Hill." "You are like my cousin Nicholas, who thinks no prospect complete unless that hill forms part of it," said Richard. But since I find that you will often come hither at sunset, I shall not despair of seeing and conversing with you again, even if I am forbidden the house by Mistress Nutter. That thicket is an excellent hiding place, and this stream is easily crossed." "We can have no secret interviews, Richard," replied Alizon. "I shall come hither to think of you, but not to meet you. You must never return to Rough Lee again. That is, not unless some change takes place which I dare not anticipate. But hist! I am called. I must go back to the house." "The voice came from the other side of the river," said Richard. "And hark! it calls again. Who can it be?" "It is Jennet," replied Alizon. "I see her now." And she pointed out the little girl standing beside an alder on the opposite bank. "You didna notice me afore, Alizon," cried Jennet, in her sharp tone, and with her customary provoking laugh. "But ey seed you plain enough, and heerd you too. And ey heerd Mester Richard say he would hide i' this thicket, and cross the river to meet you at sunset. Little pigs, they say, ha' long ears, and mine weren't gi'en me for nowt." "They have somewhat misinformed you in this instance," replied Alizon. "But how, in the name of wonder, did you come here?" "Very easily," replied Jennet, "boh ey hanna time to tell you now. Granny Demdike has sent me hither wi' a message to you and Mistress Nutter. But maybe you winna like Mester Richard to hear what ey ha' gotten to tell you." "I will leave you," said Richard, about to depart. "Oh, no, no!" cried Alizon. "She can have nothing to say which you may not hear." "Shanna I go back to Granny Demdike, and tell her you're too proud to receive her message?" asked the child. "On no account," whispered Richard. "Do not let her anger the old hag." "Speak, Jennet," said Alizon, in a tone of kind persuasion. "Ey shanna speak onless you come ower t' wetur to me," replied the little girl. "And what ey ha to say concerns you mitch." "I can easily cross," observed Alizon to Richard. "Those stones seem placed on purpose." Upon this, descending from the terrace to the river's brink, and springing lightly upon the first stone which reared its head above the foaming tide, she bounded to another, and so in an instant was across the stream. Richard saw her ascend the opposite bank, and approach Jennet, who withdrew behind the alder, and then he fancied he perceived an old beldame, partly concealed by the intervening branches of the tree, advance and seize hold of her. Then there was a scream, and the sound had scarcely reached the young man's ears before he was down the bank and across the river. But when he reached the alder, neither Alizon, nor Jennet, nor the old beldame were to be seen. The terrible conviction that she had been carried off by Mother Demdike then smote him, and though he continued his search for her among the adjoining bushes, it was with fearful misgivings. No answer was returned by his shouts, nor could he discover any trace of the means by which Alizon had been spirited away. After some time spent in ineffectual search, uncertain what course to pursue, and with a heart full of despair, Richard crossed the river and proceeded towards the house, in front of which he found Mistress Nutter and Nicholas, both of whom seemed surprised when they perceived he was unaccompanied by Alizon. The lady immediately, and somewhat sharply, questioned him as to what had become of her adopted daughter, and appeared at first to doubt his answer; but at length, unable to question his sincerity, she became violently agitated. "The poor girl has been conveyed away by Mother Demdike," she cried, "though for what purpose I am at a loss to conceive. The old hag could not cross the running water, and therefore resorted to that stratagem." "Alizon must not be left in her hands, madam," said Richard. "She must not," replied the lady. "If Blackadder, whom I have sent after Parson Holden, were here, I would despatch him instantly to Malkin Tower." "I will go instead," said Richard. "You had better accept his offer," interposed Nicholas. "He will serve you as well as Blackadder." "Go I shall, madam," cried Richard; "if not on your account, on my own." "Come with me, then," said the lady, entering the house, "and I will furnish you with that which shall be your safeguard in the enterprise." With this she proceeded to the closet where her interview with Roger Nowell had been held, and unlocking an ebony cabinet, took from a drawer within it a small flat piece of gold, graven with mystic characters, and having a slender chain of the same metal attached to it. Throwing this chain over Richard's neck, she said, "Place this